welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring you leave no stone unturned for these upcoming MMA events. You know the deal, over 5,300 fighter profiles, 7-day free trial, over 115 subscribers on the service now as well. If you enjoy doing tape, researching and predicting your own fights, check the MMA Fight Archive. It is your one-stop shop to ensure you leave no stone unturned, with as many direct links as possible for past fights. We got you covered, and there's a ton of MMA to go over this weekend alone. You got two UAE Warrior events. You got PFL. You got one Friday fights. You got LFA, Risen, Octagon, Aries, KSW, and Anthony Pettis FC. All of those fights and fighters are on the MMA Fight Archive. Make sure you guys check it out. 7-day free trial, like I said. Check the link in the description below. All right. Today, we are talking about PFL 5, which is their first semifinal event, as we have 4 fighters from the welterweight division and featherweight division looking to stamp their ticket to the finals, which I believe are taking place in August or September. But 4 fighters are looking to stamp their ticket there. So decent card all around. There were a few changes. There was a fight that just got canceled between Asael Ajuj and Yves Landu, I believe it was, but that wasn't a part of the tournament anyway, so doesn't really matter. But yeah, we got some showcase bouts and we got some newcomers as well to talk about. Before I get into the breakdowns, I do want to quickly remind you guys I got all my tracked plays, degenerate parlays, props, all that good stuff for the UFC card and the PFL on the MMALOTN Patreon page. But you can also find the breakdowns for LFA 210, Octagon 72, and KSW 107, which all go down this weekend as well. You can all find that on the the MMA Lock of the Night Patreon page. Check the link in the description below for that. And reminder, this PFL card takes place on Thursday, so don't get caught napping or anything there. Usually they're on Friday or Saturdays, but this time around they're on a Thursday, so keep that in mind when you're placing your bets or looking to research this card. All right, without wasting too much more time, we're going to get right into the breakdowns here. I believe there's 10 fights scheduled for this card taking place in, I believe, Nashville, Tennessee. First matchup up is between 2 PFL newcomers, Jason Danner, who comes in at -300, and Nathan Gilmore, who comes in at +240. Now, Danner had a successful 5-1 run as an amateur. He's now 2-0 as a pro. Seems to train out of the Tennessee area, so maybe that's why he's on this card. All of his pro wins have come in the first round, while 4 of his 5 amateur wins came in the first round, fighting very low-level competition, fighting guys that were like 2-19. Seems to be a very aggressive fighter, but again, doing it against very poor resistance and almost no resistance will lead to him getting those early finishes. So he has yet to face any resistance. So the fact that he finds himself at -300 here is just whopping to me. But he's taken on a guy that's way more experienced than him, may have a saltier record, but Nathan Gilmore has a 4-5 pro record, went 11-6 as an amateur and faced some decent competition the entire way. Even as a pro has faced some decent competition, gone to split decisions with a couple of bright prospects on the regional scene. Currently fighting a 3-fight winning streak after starting his career 0-4, 4-1 over his last 5 fights. A training partner of Mr. Danny Barlow, who's a UFC welterweight, I believe. Very solid physicality, decent wrestling, good smothering techniques, really likes to control his opponents, utilizing his physicality to just keep guys muzzled pretty much. And I'm kind of surprised he's such a big underdog here, and I think it's largely due to him having a losing record. But if you look over on the other side, sure, if you just look at it on the surface, it looks good with Danner having a 7-1 total MMA career, including his amateur and pro fights, but he hasn't faced any resistance during that time. He's just going out there and squishing these guys, whereas Gilmore has actually fought resistance and will put up a decent enough fight. Probably the first time Danner will ever face resistance in mixed martial arts. So that alone makes me want to take a little bit of a shot here on Nathan Gilmore. Now, I don't know enough about Danner. I did as much research as I possibly could. Maybe he's this killer on the, just coming up that not a lot of people know about as of yet. So maybe he's able to turn the tables here and just really show people that, okay, I am worth this minus 300 line, but everything that I've seen from tape thus far makes me want to take a little bit of a shot on Nathan Gilmore. So I'm going to go Gilmore to grind this fight out and win it on the scorecards. Next up, we got Alexei Pergande coming in at minus 700, going up against Mike Bardsley, who comes in at plus 500. Now, Pergande is looking to earn his 6th pro win this weekend. He earned his 5th back in August, where he really grinded out a tough opponent. His opponent had some very slick BJJ, so we saw Pergande, who normally likes to apply his own grappling. He leaned more so on his striking and really picked apart his opponent. He got to his grappling in the latter half of that fight to really secure that victory, but he's a bright prospect. Killcliff FC product. PFL slowly bringing him along. He has the physicality. He has the athleticism. The technical skills are really starting to catch up as well, but it's really his physicality when he looks to just grind opponents up against the cage, look to take them to the ground. He's done a good job in terms of finishing guys on the mat when he gets them there as well. He's more than capable of going 15 minutes if he needs to, and he also likes that front choke series where you often see him attacking either a guillotine, anaconda choke, or a Darce choke. His opponent this weekend, Mike Bardsley, has been at the shit end of the stick for 2 losses over his amateur and pro career. The one in his amateur career was his last amateur fight. Lost it by cut, which is always an unfortunate way for a fighter to lose a fight, knowing they usually want to continue on through it and will battle through those type of more aesthetically unpleasing injuries. And then in his last loss for PFL, which was his lone PFL appearance, was when he had gone up against a very bright prospect in Brian Zurcher, and that was a fight where I thought, it was clear he got rocked, but I thought he was clearly still in the fight, and I thought he was doing a good job in terms of bouncing back to his feet and providing some resistance, but the referee had stopped the fight very quickly after getting dropped. So he didn't really give Bardsley much of a chance to try to battle back in that matchup. Bardsley is a guy that normally likes to implement his own grapple-heavy approach. He trains under the Douglas and Diego Lima over there at the Atlanta branch of American Top Team. Like I said, solid grappling style, likes to wear opponents down, has a decent pace, even with his striking as well. But guys that can normally stop his takedowns and touch him up on the feet are the ones that are usually going to cause him some issues. Now, I'm not fully behind this minus 700 line on Pergande, not so much to the point that I'm going to switch up and actually take the underdog here. I still think Pergande wins. I think he's just more athletic. I think he's stronger. I think he's responsible enough in the striking realm that he can mix his grappling behind his striking, and I think he can kind of thwart the aggressive nature of Bardsley's game. Minus 700 is just too much. Bardsley's no pushover. Even though he lost his lone PFL fight, that was against a very high-level prospect as well. So, and again, kind of a controversial stoppage there. Not like he was winning that fight going into the stoppage, but still was showcasing some decent things, and he might be able to do the same thing here against Pergande. But I'm going to go Pergande by decision. If we get that at anywhere around plus 100 or anything better than that, I might consider that prop, but otherwise I'm fine with just predicting Pergande to win here and passing on this chalky spot. All right, next up, we got Mohamed Berkhamov coming in at minus 260, going up against Kenley St. Louis, who comes in at plus 200. Now, starting off on the Berkhamov side of things, he did come up short against Thad Jean back in April, and that was the opening round of the welterweight tournament, and we saw him, be somewhat competitive, landed a takedown, although he was fending off a guillotine the entire time until Thad Jean eventually worked his way back to his feet, and then found that big shot to put Berkhamov away. But he's one of the better Russian wrestling jiu-jitsu players that are out there, right? He has some good wrestling to get opponents to the ground, great scrambling ability, also does a great job in terms of controlling his opponents and advancing to dominant positions to eventually look for submission victories. He's very nasty once he gets his submission game going. I believe the majority of his wins have come by submission, but he's also not all that lost on the feet either. I think against Jean, he just came up short that night because he couldn't match the athleticism, power, or explosivity of Jean. But normally we see Berkhamov showcasing a good enough striking game, which allows his grappling to flow a little bit easier behind it. He's 17-3, 31 years old. I think we saw him at his best when he took on guys like Herman Tirado and Ray Cooper III last year. And I think he's still capable of high-level performances, even if he's not even in the PFL tournament anymore. Now, he goes up against Kenley St. Louis, who is a training partner of Berkhamov's last opponent, Thad Jean, and he currently rides a 7-fight winning streak after starting his career 3-4. His last loss actually came against Vyacheslav Borishev back in mid-2021, but since then he's been able to pull off some solid victories, including 2 of those on the PFL Challenger Series back in 2023, which is where I originally came across him, or at least where I originally started to study him, because I had heard of him even before that. He would then take a year and a half away from action, return at CFFC in September, and won a split decision against a 6-3 opponent. He normally looks to utilize a grapple-heavy approach as well. His striking is a lot of empty offense, not a huge amount of threat there. He throws some good combinations, has a nice tight hook that he likes to throw as well, but it's all about setting up that takedown and grinding opponents out on the mat. I also believe he has a bit of a cardio issue in fights that he can't dictate the pace, because most of the fights we've seen him as of late, he's been able to just take opponents to the ground, find those moments to breathe, and then start advancing to dominant positions to either finish them or just grind those spots out. And he's a solid fighter. I think he's a good regional fighter that probably won't be able to make it to the next level, especially if he keeps taking these tough matchups like he's taking this weekend. Now, I'm kind of surprised Berkhamov is not a bigger favorite in this spot. I think people are seeing maybe just the knockout loss for Berkhamov last time around, seeing the grappling chops of St. Louis as well. But I think Berkhamov will be the one that's controlling the grappling exchanges, especially with his wrestling advantage. And I think he's the better scrambler as well, but also has the better cardio and the better striking. So I think no matter where this fight takes place, I think Berkhamov can kind of trump whatever St. Louis is throwing back his way, and I think he can go out there and eventually find a finish maybe in the second or third round. Again, I just think he's the better overall fighter, and I'd put him closer between minus 350 and minus 400. So to get him at minus 260 right now, I think is a bit of a steal. So whether you want to play him straight just to win one unit or even look to parlay him somewhere, I wouldn't be mad at that. All right, next up, we're going to be talking about Joseph Luciano coming in at minus 290, going up against Ceric Shields, who comes in at plus 230. Now, starting off on the Luciano side, he was actually given the last-minute step up back in April, as he was originally scheduled to fight Ceric Shields in an alternate matchup. But after Magomed Umalatov missed weight very badly, Luciano was given the call up, and he ended up facing Logan Storley and ended up suffering, I believe, it was a loss where Storley just got to the Storley game, right? Storley is such a strong and relentless wrestler, especially when he gets his hands on you. It's usually very hard for opponents to get away from him, and Luciano fell victim to that, as he's normally the one that likes to implement a grapple-heavy approach. Now, the 7 of his 10 wins have come by submission, so don't let those Muay Thai tattoos fool you. This guy has some solid Muay Thai skills, but it's all about the grappling for him, looking to overwhelm opponents with his physicality, taking them to the ground, and then eventually setting up that submission to get them out of there. His other loss, I know he has a loss to current UFC fighter Jonathan McAuliffe. The guys that he was struggling to get those the physicality off against, and we know McAuliffe is a very big, strong guy as well. But Luciano is a guy that's kind of won over my respect, seeing how he was able to fend off Storley's approaches. Even though he got control for most of that matchup, he stayed in it long enough that he didn't get finished and showcase some good things of his own. Now he's going up against another guy that's going to be looking to implement a grapple-heavy approach against him here, as Ceric Shields was. Again, he was supposed to fight back in April for LFA, gets pulled out of that so that he can step in for the PFL, and then he gets pulled out of that because Luciano gets the call-up. So luckily for Shields, he still gets the opportunity to fight for the PFL, ends up still fighting the guy that he was scheduled to face that night, but at least this time he gets a longer time to actually prepare for this matchup so that he can be properly equipped to try to pull off the upset. He's a solid grappler. I believe he's a BJJ brown belt. At least that's what he earned back in December. Trains out of the Portland branch of American Top Team. Very strong, very physical, does a good job in terms of just taking opponents to the ground, finding those submission opportunities or grinding them out. But the majority of his wins have come against, or losses, sorry, have come against guys that are able to stop the grappling and make him pay on the feet. Notable guys, Josh Quinlan, Thad Jean, who main events this card, and even Alfonso Leyva, who main evented a few LFA cards himself. The issue with Shields is he doesn't have the best gas tank management. So if he can be successful with his grappling early, he starts to fall off with his efficiency, and that's where I believe Luciano can really start to take over. I think Luciano can match his physicality. I think he can match the grappling of Shields, and I think that will allow Luciano to stay away from the early finishing danger of Shields, start to take over in the second and third rounds, and eventually find a finish. I don't mind this minus 290 line. Maybe look to parlay him with something else on this card. All right, next up in this alternate bout for, I believe, the welterweight division, we got Magomed Umalatov coming in at minus 1,400 going up against Anthony Ivy, who comes in at plus 800. I don't want to spend too much time on this fight. I believe Umalatov has Ivy covered everywhere. Ivy is obviously a decent submission specialist, but I'd be surprised if he catches Umalatov in anything. I think we'll see Umalatov pretty much walk down Ivy. I think he can find the big shot within a round and a half and get him out of there quickly. I'll keep my eye out for the under 1.5, and if it's at anything better than minus 185, I'll probably take that chalk. But I think Umalatov squashes Ivy, finishes him quickly. But again, I don't like parlaying minus 1,400 favorites, even if I think that they are a shoe-in of getting the win. It just doesn't do enough for the parlay to be worth the risk, especially and you guys will hear this every time I do a breakdown when we're talking about, minus 1,000 favorites or higher. MMA is too volatile of a sport to be trusting parlay pieces that wide. But again, I think Umalatov squashes Anthony and he finishes him pretty quickly. Another alternate matchup now going down in the featherweight division. We got Jeremy Kennedy coming in at plus 155 going up against Adam Borics, who comes in at minus 185. Now, starting off on the Kennedy side of things, he's on a 3-fight losing streak, but this guy has done a very good job in terms of rising his stock even in those losses. The first loss came against Patricio Pitbull, where he fought him for the title last year. I believe it was March of last year, and he made a very good account of himself. That was a fight where he was not relying so heavily on his usual grapple-heavy approach, but rather putting together a volume-based approach with his striking, and that really seemed to overwhelm Patricio Pitbull, roughly for about 2.5 rounds, before Pitbull ended up landing a big shot that hurt Kennedy very badly, and then we quickly saw Pitbull start to swarm Kennedy and eventually get him out of there in that third round, seemingly pulling off a comeback after Kennedy was fully in control of that matchup. He did end up getting beaten pretty convincingly by Gabriel Braga, and then last time around in April, in the opening round of the World Tournament, he went up against former PFL champion Movlid Khaybulaev, sorry. I'm going to be talking about him in his next matchup, so might as well get his name right. And he came in as a decent sized underdog, and he performed very well. I think he got or at least deserved some 10-8s in that first round after having Khaybulaev in trouble the entirety of that first round, hurting him very badly and almost putting him away. And then he got hurt himself and almost put away in the second round. And then it came down to the third round where I thought Khaybulaev did enough to slightly edge that fight out, and I thought that we saw Khaybulaev deserved that victory, but Kennedy's stock definitely rose. A lot of people thought he was going to get quickly squashed by Pitbull, maybe quickly squashed by Khaybulaev as well, and he put up a damn good fight. He's realizing that desperation wrestling heavy approach is no longer going to be the road to victory for him anymore, but mixing in some more volume with his striking, sitting down on his shots a little bit more, putting some output out there that opponents just start to think about more before he eventually changes levels and looks to utilize that grappling once again. And he has a great cardio game as well, so he can go a hard 15 if he needs to. Now he's rematching a guy here in Adam Borics, who I was leaning on last time as an underdog to Jesus Pinedo, and it didn't seem like Borics could really get comfortable considering the power punches that were coming back his way from the Pinedo side of things. Borics is usually a very crisp, clean striker that likes to counter his opponents, utilize fast, stinging shots down the pipe. He normally utilizes good range range management and footwork to keep his distance and keep opponents away. Takedown defense has largely held up. We saw him have to fend off a ton of takedowns and grappling from Enrique Barzola, and that was a very close fight that probably could have gone either way, but he landed enough damage for at least two judges to see that fight in his favor. And he still has a stellar 19-3 record, and I think he still has the ability to be successful at this stage of his career. And I think this fight against Jeremy Kennedy is a good kind of litmus test to see if he has what it takes to keep competing against some of these higher level guys. The last fight between Kennedy and Borics, we saw Borics pretty much touch Kennedy up on the feet, but that was before we saw Kennedy actually get the confidence to start throwing his hands a little more. So I'd be interested to see how he looks to change this fight up and maybe looks to attack Borics more with the striking, hopefully avoiding some of the counter striking of Borics and looking to get this fight to the ground after that. But I ultimately think that Borics is just a little bit too slick of a striker. I think once Kennedy starts to get that confidence in his hands, he's going to get countered and he's going to get hit very hard. And I think that's going to cause Kennedy some trouble here. I don't think that Borics finishes Kennedy. As much of a nasty striker Borics is, he's not much of a finisher, as the majority of his wins have come on the scorecards. But I expect him to go out there, defend the takedowns, thwart the aggressive striking approach of Kennedy, touch him up on the feet, and then eventually win this fight on the scorecards. Line a little bit too wide for me to get behind here, but and also we got to take into consideration the improvements from Kennedy and if he's able to go out there and overcome this loss that he had to Borics from 4 years ago. But I'll go Borics by decision. All right, next up, we got Movlid Khaybulaev coming in at -215, going up against Tae Kyun Kim, who comes in at +175. Now, you did not hear wrong. Khaybulaev is a guy that normally finds himself as a very chalky favorite, but for some reason now finds himself at -215. And I think a lot of people are reading into that fight that he had against Jeremy Kennedy last time around. Now, we got to give Khaybulaev a little bit of a leeway going into that Kennedy fight. He'd been away from action for over 2 years. There's clearly some ring rust in his game. He has been a guy that's been hit in the past before, but has still managed to bounce back and get to his relentless grappling game that not a lot of opponents can get up from under. And he also has some solid power in his shots when he looks to blitz the pocket with the wide winging hooks. But he's still a very capable fighter. He's still, I believe, close enough to his prime that he can go out there and showcase those championship type performances that he's had before. And the adversity that he faced in the Kennedy fight to battle back from that was very impressive. So, I think he still has what it takes, and I think he still has the hunger to go out there and showcase that he's one of the best, if not the best, PFL fighter on the roster. Like I said, relentless wrestling, good top pressure, good power, good finishing abilities if that's what he wants to try to get out of it as well. But just tighten up that striking defense a little bit more, and I think people would be more comfortable betting him back up to the line that he normally comes in at. But again, maybe this is just a small dip, and by the time the fight goes down, he finds himself back up at -400. Now, Kim, relatively unknown coming into the PFL back in April, went up against a very tough Nathan Kelly, and we saw Kim pretty much thwart the entire grappling approach of Kelly and eventually land some big shots of his own until he eventually found that submission to put Kelly clean out. Kim is a very solid defensive wrestling game, very slick striker with tight shots down the pipe, really looking to hurt his opponents from distance, has a decent understanding of the range management side of things so that he can be even more effective just picking his opponents apart. And his only loss came by split decision against former UFC fighter Roman Bogatov in a Brave CF title fight. And it was a very close fight, but I thought ultimately Bogatov managed to do enough to actually get that win. Also, from what I've heard, Kim has had to deal with some controversy stemming from, being a young, dumb kid, but apparently was accused of some fucked up shit. Apparently it wasn't true, but he has been unable to battle back from that stuff. And I think that's why we're not really seeing him in the conversation of being brought over to the UFC. Even before he got signed with the PFL, And even though he had a pretty damn good record and was finishing guys left and right. But in this matchup against Khaybulaev, I think we'll see those defensive grappling skills be put to work. And I think we'll see Khaybulaev be successful with it. Like, Khaybulaev does not need to complete the first takedown. It's all about getting in on that first attempt so that he can start chain wrestling the rest of those takedowns. And I think from there, Kim's going to start to get some trouble. He might be able to stuff the first, second, third attempt. But I think once Khaybulaev continues to keep that pressure and that wrestling pace on him, it's just a matter of time before he ends up landing that takedown and getting Kim to the mat. I think this minus 215 line is a big gift. I think if you overlook that or give him a little bit of or cut him some slack for that performance that he had against Jeremy Kennedy, knowing that it was a 2-year layoff that he had going into that fight, maybe there is some substance and some solid value that we can actually get on this Khaybulaev line at minus 215. So I think Khaybulaev grinds this fight out. I think Kim will be tough to put away. Kim might have a little bit of success, but for the most part, I think this looks pretty damn good for Khaybulaev, who wins this fight on the scorecards. All right. In the next tournament bout here, going down in the welterweight division, we got Logan Storley coming in at minus 725, going up against Masayuki Kikuiri, who comes in at plus 525. Now, Storley is a guy, we know he likes to get to his usual wrestling grind, and he was successful in doing so against Joseph Luciano last time around. Although he has some shortcomings in his striking game, it's obvious he's done the work to try to mask his takedowns well enough behind some of his combinations so that he can be even more effective. He's very good at holding on to his opponents, chain wrestling attempts together, mat returning his opponents, has the cardio to keep it up for 15 minutes if he needs to. And the only guys that he's really lost to are Yaroslav Amislov twice and then Shamil Musayev, who was the breakout star for PFL last year. And just a side note, it is an absolute shame that we are 6 months into the year and we still have yet to get a Musayev fight announcement. Huge fumble by PFL if they don't have him fight by the end of the summer, but it is what it is. He's going up against Masayuki Kikuiri, who I believe I backed last time around as my lock of the night play against Janusz Bashar. And Kikuiri did a great job in terms of stopping the takedowns of Bashar and then punishing him on the feet. But to me, it almost seemed like Bashar had an injury going into that matchup. Bashar is normally a guy that likes to implement his knockout power and try to get opponents out of there quickly, but he looked to grapple from jump, and that seemed to gas him out. It seemed it was just his way of hiding his injury until he got to the ending of the second round, where it just seemed like he didn't have anything left in the tank, and then he ended up quitting on the stool, allowing Kikuiri to pick up that win, but more importantly advance to the semifinal of the world tournament. He's 3-0 with PFL He'll be facing his toughest challenge to date this weekend, and I think he's going to struggle. Kikuiri normally showcases solid grappling, and like I said, he shut down all the grappling onslaught from Bashar back in April. But this is not Bashar. This is a guy that will clearly be the toughest grappling threat that Kikuiri has ever faced. And I think Storley will come through with his style as he normally does. Minus 725, again, kind of hard to get behind with Storley, as we know Kikuiri will have a clear striking advantage, but I don't think he'll be able to get to that advantage long enough, as Storley will continuously be clinging on to him, grinding him out, winning this fight on the scorecards. Maybe we see some Kikuiri love come in before fight time and we can get Storley at a better line. But as of right now, I'll probably pass. But I'd like him to win this matchup by decision. All right, co-main event going down in the featherweight division. And this is the featherweight semifinal, as the winner will face the winner of the Khaybulaev and Kim fight from earlier on in the card. We got former PFL champion Jesus Pinedo coming in at minus 215 as he throws down for the rubber match against Gabriel Braga, who comes in at plus 175. Starting off on the Pinedo side of things, we saw ring rust kind of affect Khaybulaev's performance against Jeremy Kennedy last time around. Not so much for Pinedo, as he made his return after a year and a half away from action in April, and he pretty much put the beat down on Adam Borics, finishing him in the first round of that matchup. Very good performance from Pinedo and showcasing why he's so dangerous in this division. He's a guy that likes to implement a lot of aggressive striking, likes to march down his opponents and throw big wigging shots, has some decent shots down the pipe as well, but I think it's just that constant pace and pressure and moving forward that causes a lot of opponents' issues. It's crazy that he got cut from being in the UFC after going 1-1 with the promotion. He's now 8-1 since leaving the promotion, but more importantly, he has a PFL title on his mantle and $1 million paycheck that he was able to cash, something that he probably would not have been able to do in the UFC. Done a great job of shutting down all of those fighters that look to wrestle him. He's finished all 8 of his wins during this run as well, and I've been guilty of writing him off in the past, but the guy continuously goes out there and proves me wrong, showcasing that his wild aggressive style is effective against the type of opponents that he's facing in PFL, and he's done it against the guy that he's facing again this weekend. Now, Braga's only 2 losses have been to former PFL champions, one against Pinedo and one against Timur Khizriev last year. I believe that was in the finals or semifinals, if I'm not mistaken. But still, he's one of the better fighters on the roster. Very slick and nasty striker with a good calf kicking game. He also has a nasty BJJ game, but I think that his wrestling needs a little bit more leveling up if he hopes to implement it against guys that can actually stop a takedown or two. And we saw last time around, he got threatened with a very deep choke from jump by Frederic Duprat. And once Duprat, gassed his arms out, we saw Braga flip the script, eventually get his own submission and force a quick tap from his opponent. He's very poised, he's very technical, he's very disciplined, but that may have worked against him when he fought Pinedo last time. In that fight against Pinedo, the first one went to a split decision where Braga did win, and I thought Pinedo actually had done enough to win that fight. In the rematch, which was actually for the, I believe, 2023 title in the finals, we saw Braga have a decent first round, but Pinedo really started to pick it up at the latter half of that first round, then continued that onslaught in the second round, and quickly found that finish in the third round. To Braga's defense, I thought it was a little bit of a quick stoppage. Braga was still standing. It seemed like he was defending well enough, even though he was eating a lot of shots, I should say. But considering the stakes that were on the line, $1 million paycheck, a world title, you got to give Braga a little bit more rope. With that said, I don't think that would have changed anything. I think that still would have seen Pinedo go out there and overwhelm Braga, maybe not get a finish, but at least win most of those rounds and end up winning the fight regardless. This is a fight where I've picked Braga in both of the first 2 fights, but seeing how those fights have transpired and seeing the way Braga does not do well against guys that apply pressure against him, I think Pinedo is once again the side here. I think he's going to go out there. I think he's going to shut down Braga, and I think he's going to hit him with some big shots that Braga is not going to be able to come back from. And I think that's where Braga's issue is, right? He's just staying so technical and tight, but once Pinedo really starts to pressure him and keep him on his back foot, that's where we'll see Pinedo really start to land some big shots, really start breaking Braga. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Braga look to get this fight to the ground, but I don't think he'll be able to get off on much success there. I think it'll be just a matter of time before Pinedo gets back to his feet, and then from there I think he ends up overwhelming Braga and landing some big shots of his own. So I'm going to go Pinedo here. Feel pretty good about it. I hope this is not me just swinging too far on the pendulum and just siding with Pinedo. But I just think he's a much tougher opponent for Braga, and I think stylistically this very much favors Pinedo. So I'm going to go Pinedo by knockout. I think he finishes him in the second or third round. But even just his money line here at minus 215, I don't think it's that bad of a spot to take. So give me Pinedo and Pinedo by knockout. All right. That brings us to the main event of the evening in the welterweight division. Welterweight semifinal. Again, the winner of this matchup will go on to fight the winner of Logan Storley and Masayuki Kikuiri. We got Jason Jackson, former Bellator champion, coming in at minus 210, going up against Thad Jean, who comes in at plus 170. Starting off with Jackson, his 2024 campaign ended with him losing the title to Ramazan Kuramagomedov, who should definitely be fighting Shamil Musayev later this year, right? But PFL has not made any note of that whatsoever. Crazy, again. just got to talk about how crazy good Shamil Musayev is and the fact that we still haven't seen him fight. And it's clear that he should be fighting for the title next. Anyway, he lost the title back in June of last year to Kuramagomedov. Then he set his sights on a new goal, which was to win this PFL World Tournament. He had a very successful first matchup against Andrei Koreshkov, where he took him to the ground, repeatedly overwhelmed him with some pressure, and eventually found that submission in the dying seconds of the second round. And that's Jackson's game. Relentless wrestling, decent calf kicks, staying on the pressure, looking for his openings to get fights to the ground. And once he gets them there, he's usually very good in terms of out-damaging opponents. He's crazy that, the two opportunities that he had to make it to the UFC, it didn't really come through. I believe he was on the Ultimate Fighter, and then he lost on the Contender Series due to an injury. And then since then, he's 12-2 since being away from the UFC. Again, only losses are to high-level competition. It's usually his grappling pace that overwhelms a lot of opponents. He's finished his last 3 victories after his previous 7 had come by decision. So maybe there is a little bit of an uptick in his aggression to try to be a little bit more exciting and a little bit more of a draw, but we know what to expect. Wrestling. Now, with that, Gene, I've long called this guy the dark horse of the promotion, but it seems like he is the dark horse no more. Being put in this main event slot, clearly the promotional, the hype is around Thaddeus. The guy's an absolute finisher, continuously going out there and just finishing the majority of his opponents. I don't think he finished Chris Brown. I think there was another one where he had won by decision, but normally going out there and starching his opponents. He's very athletic, very explosive, has a ton of power, very fast as well. And I think he has that athletic frame and that build to just do special things in mixed martial arts. I think this guy has a very, very high ceiling. And I think a lot of that has to do with his athleticism. And it seems like his technical skills are really starting to catch up with him as well. I came across him back in early 2023 where he pulled off a nasty knockout victory. I'm happy to see that he's finally getting bigger matchups. This is a pretty big jump to go from, Mohamed Berkhamov to Jason Jackson, both guys that present similar issues. But I think Thaddeus had shown in the Berkhamov fight he could thwart some of the wrestling, but Jackson will be a little bit more assertive and relentless with trying to land that wrestling and trying to grind Thaddeus out. But I'm going to go with Gene here ever so slightly. I know Jackson has the strength of schedule advantage. I know Jackson way more experienced, but I think Gene just has it. I think he has that thing where he'll be able to stop the takedowns of Jackson, mostly keep this fight on the feet, land those big shots, and eventually find that big knockout here to get the victory. So plus 180, plus 170, not a bad line. I think this is worth a little bit of a shot. Nothing uber confident. Again, we got to take into consideration the strength of schedule and experience advantage of Jackson, and the fact that this will be the most assertive grappler that Gene will have faced in his short career thus far. But I think he'll be up to snuff. I think he'll be ready for this opportunity. I think he'll rise to the occasion, and I think he'll eventually find that knockout and pull off the upset here. So give me that Gene by knockout. There you guys go. PFL semifinals broken down for you guys. I believe the next 2 weeks will also have PFL cards as well. So I'll be back, obviously, breaking down those fights for you guys. Don't worry about that. I'll have all my official plays on the MMALOTN Patreon page. So make sure you guys check that out if you're looking to just, cheat off my sheet rather than just trying to figure out who I'm going with by watching this breakdown. Otherwise, I'll see you guys later today for the Chalk or Not segment for UFC Atlanta, and then tomorrow for the quick picks, I think just the quick picks video. Good luck on all your action this weekend, folks, and I'll see you guys again later tonight. Peace.
Last thing.